Hey, good morning, everybody. Wednesday, November 27th, and this will be the last Watercooler Wednesday going into the holiday week here. In fact, shortly after this, I'm going to be heading down to Fort Lauderdale to be with family for the rest of the week. And I hope you all have a safe and enjoyable holiday as well. Wanted to cover something a little bit different today. I usually talk about case studies and success stories and things like that. But last night I got an email from a client about 8:30, 9 o'clock, something like that. And they have a note on a property up in South Carolina that was damaged during the hurricane, and they just found out about it in the evening, and they sent me an email saying, "Uh-oh, what do I do here?" So I thought about that, and this morning I said, you know what? Let's address risk, a couple of different approaches to investing, because no matter what you invest in, there's risk involved, right? So we have to identify that risk, and we have to take measures to minimize that risk. Some things are within our control, some things are really not within our control, but we can adjust appropriately so we can always measure risk with reward, which is very important. So rather than a case study today for you, I do want to talk about risk, and just started putting a PowerPoint presentation together this morning. It's really not even finished. I was working on it just before I jumped on board here, but I'll finish the rest of it as we go through. So if you want to watch the video portion of this, you can check out my YouTube channel. Just under my name. So just go to YouTube and search Kevin Shortell, Shortle, and you can get the full video version. If you'd rather listen to it in a podcast format, it'll be rebroadcast on my podcast, which is under my Real Estate Without Renters brand, which is also the same name of my book that you can get on Amazon, #1 bestseller, Real Estate Without Renters. So let's jump right into it here. I'm going to go share my screen for those who are watching this. Okay, so when it comes to risk and risk exposure in this business of buying real estate backed notes, there's a couple of risk areas that we'll look at. The biggest are really investment risk and collateral risk. Investment risk, we have some control, in fact, a good degree of control with, because we measure our risk with something called investment to value. And that's a ratio. And the ratio is really just the relationship between what you are investing, how much you're investing, divided by the value of the underlying collateral. The thought process being there, if they don't pay me on the note that I own, I end up with the property or being cashed out at a foreclosure sale. So the collateral value is very important, because the greater the distance between your investment and that value, the lower your investment to value ratio. So in other words, if you have a $100,000 property and you're buying a $95,000 note, you're in a 95% investment to value ratio. That's extremely high, because if you take that property back or have to foreclose, you're essentially at break even. You don't want to, or losing money. You don't want to do that. Contrast that to a $100,000 property where they only owe $30,000 and you're investing $25,000 in that note. Now you have a 25% investment to value ratio. It'd be very difficult to lose money on that. Even if property values drop 10%, now it's worth 90, you're still in it at 25. Drops 20%, now it's worth 80,000, you're in it for 25. Very hard to lose value on something like that when your collateral is worth so much more than your investment. So this is a measurement, a yardstick, if you will, that we utilize in the industry to measure that. Now, being that for the most part, our collateral is going to be real estate, probably improved real estate, single family home, etc. It could be vacant land, and there's value in vacant land as well. But we'll just stick with the single family home example for this, because a single family home collateral risk is a part of it, right? So investment risk we can measure with our investment to value ratio, but collateral risk, what happens again, not only if the property values, we can adjust that. We can look at that and measure that safely, but what if the collateral goes up in smoke? What if a hurricane comes through? What if it's heavily damaged? What if it completely burns down? What do we do? Well, we identify that risk. We have no control under acts of God, if you will. No control over somebody falling asleep and leaving the oven on and causing a big fire or anything like that. So, with those types of risks, the unknown, the things that are out of our control, we utilize insurance to cover those. Okay. So we always not only look at the value of the collateral, but we make sure that that collateral is insured. In fact, it is required by the security agreements that the borrower keeps the property insured. Okay, we'll come back to that concept in once a minute. So when it comes to collateral risk, let's focus on that now. When it comes to collateral risk of the property, we're covering ourselves with property insurance. Okay, what type of insurance depends upon the type of security instrument, right? So in this business, we buy a note with a security agreement. Okay, we call it the note industry, but it's really a secured note in the form that we're buying a note and a security agreement. And the security agreement typically comes in one of three forms: a mortgage, a deed of trust, or a contract for deed. Those are the three types of security instruments that you are going to see in this business. So let's break those down. If it's a mortgage or a type of mortgage called a deed of trust, we don't own the property. We own the note. The borrower is on the title to the property. The borrower has the deed to the property. Therefore, they are the owner of the property. They inherit then all of the risks and the burdens of ownership. Upkeep of the property, paying for taxes, all of those would fall under the burden category. And the risk would be, what if it, lightning strikes, right? It goes up in flames. So we don't own it. We are the bank. Okay. So you can parallel that to think of a car loan, right? If you own a loan on a car, in other words, they're making the car payments to you, and they get into an automobile accident. Well, if they don't have any they don't have any car insurance, do they still owe on the car loan? Yeah, that doesn't magically go away. They still own the loan. It's up to them. They are supposed to, by law, have car insurance, at least a minimal amount of car insurance on there. Now, if they have proper insurance and the car is totaled, what happens to the loan to the note owner in that case? Well, they get paid off by the insurance proceeds, right? And then the person can, hopefully have enough money to buy another car or do whatever. So the same way it works in the real estate note business is we have a collateralized interest in that property. Therefore, we go on their insurance property as a loss mortgagee because we have a vested interest and they owe us money on that property. Okay, so we don't own the property. It's simply collateral for us. The instrument, the mortgage or the deed of trust, if you read through that, you will see that they are required, the borrower is required to have insurance on the property. They're required to pay the property taxes, or are responsible to upkeep the property. All of those are in the rights and obligations of the mortgage or deed of trust security instrument. Now, the reality in life is, though, okay, they're required to do that, but what if they don't? What if they just, hey, we don't have the money, and we can't afford to get insurance on it, so we're just going to go without? And again, people do that with automobiles. They do it with health. They do it with life insurance. So it's a reality of the world. So even though contractually they're obligated to get the insurance, if they don't, we, the lien holder, we can force insurance on it. Okay, it's called forced place insurance. Okay, because we have a collateralized interest in that property. Now, we may have to pay for that up front, but we can also get reimbursed for that either on a monthly basis, annual basis, or tack it to the end of the loan. So there's various ways that we can recollect on that money, but you don't want to leave your collateral uninsured if you have a lien on it. Okay, so we will always make sure that we have the proper insurance to cover that potential collateral loss. Now, the other way to do it, quite frankly, is self-insure. Okay, so the email that I got the other night that triggered this this whole PowerPoint presentation that I was working on this morning is they didn't get, the note owner did not force insurance on the property. Okay, so there was a forced place insurance on there from the previous note owner. Okay, that expired, but the new note owner decided, I'm not going to get or forced place insurance on it. I'm going to leave the property owner to figure out if they're going to have insurance or not. Why? Because the investment was so minimal that even if the house completely burnt down and you ended up with a lot, the lot is still more money. It's still worth more money than what you had in this deal. So unusual situation, because normally you wouldn't self-insure. Forced place insurance is not expensive, especially in the property values that we work within. You're looking at $600 to $800 per year. So it's not an expensive thing to do. So generally, it's a better way to do it. But on some smaller loans, it really can cut into your profit margins, especially if you're not being reimbursed in the beginning part of the loan. So it's something that we evaluate. For the most part, you will force place insurance on it if they're not already have insurance on it, which they have to prove to us, by the way. They have to show us that they have the insurance. We call the insurance company. We get put on there as a lost mortgagee. As I said, if they don't have it, we're going to force it on there in almost all cases, but there could be certain cases where you just self-insure. In other words, you go out without the insurance on there. Now, in this particular case, we don't know the damage to the property yet, but it didn't sound like it was horrific. It just sounded like there was some storm damage. Okay. The roof leaks, siding came off. I don't imagine it's something of that great magnitude. So my student's going to be fine with it, because if it's a leak in the roof and this and that, and the borrowers chose not to get insurance, well, they're going to have to fix the roof themselves. So if that means put a tarp over it for a while till you figure it out, that's how it is. But they can't come back and sue the bank. They can't come back to my client and go, well, you didn't force insurance on this. We're not required to force insurance on the property. We can, and in most cases we do, but we're not required to do that unless there's some crazy contract that says that you are, which you wouldn't do if you were the note holder. So they should have had insurance on it. They're aware of that fact, so they're going to have to fix it on their dime. And in the meantime, does that mean they don't have to pay mortgage payments? Of course not. They still have to pay the mortgage payments. They were responsible to have insurance on there. So he's totally fine within that. Okay, so that's how we handle it on a mortgage or a deed of trust. So that risk is really covered. We verify the insurance is paid every single year. You can do that yourself. You can do that through your servicing company. If it's forced place insurance, you'll see that every single month that's coming on there. Typically, you pay an annual premium. They are invoiced to make monthly payments on that. So you'll be able to see that. And everything is just fine, because again, we have that complete separation. We are not the property owners at all. They have full title. We just have a lien on the property. The one that gets a little bit more interesting, I'll put it that way, is a contract for deed. A contract for deed is done in the seller financing world. You won't see a bank create a contract for deed, but you will see it in seller financing. Seller financing from investors, from somebody who owns a house and just sells it to somebody with seller financing, they'll do contract for deeds. And that's an interesting way to do seller financing, because the lender in a case of a contract for deed maintains legal title to the property. They will be the legal title property owner on public record. They still have the deed to the property. Now, they're agreeing under a contract for deed to surrender the title to that property once they are paid in full. In the meantime, they stay on the title. That's why it's very descriptive. It's a contract for the deed. You don't get the deed until you fulfill the contract. And the contract says, pay me off in full. Okay, which they can do over a long monthly period of time, or if they want to accelerate the loan, they want to refinance and cash it out, whatever. So the borrowers in this case don't have legal title, but they do have equitable title and certain rights that come with that, but they do not have full legal title yet. They have a contract to get it. So that brings on different obligations for a note investor, because if we are on the title to the property and we're receiving the monthly payments from them, we do take on a certain amount of liability. Okay, so I did a podcast a ways back with Beth who basically runs U.S. Risk and Lloyd's Insurance. And it's a great podcast you should go back and listen to, because she was very clear. She said, look, I understand the language of a contract for deed shifts liability over to the borrower, even though they're not on the legal title. But she said, but I can tell you from an insurance point of view, if someone gets hurt on that property, we're going after everybody, especially the party who has legal title to the property. Therefore, you don't just want forced place insurance, which is really just hazard insurance, not liability. Okay. You want hazard and liability. And there are policies that do that. They're called investor's policy in the case of Lloyd's Insurance. So they will then make sure that if the borrowers, once again, don't have full legal insurance on there with hazard and liability, then we're going to force it on there, but we're going to do a policy called an investor's policy that will cover both hazard and liability. Because again, a forced place insurance policy typically only has hazard, which is okay for a mortgage and a deed of trust, but not if you're on the legal title. If you're on the legal title, you want that extra liability. And once again, it's not expensive. That may bump things up a couple $100, from the forced place insurance policies. So that's it. I mean, you just cover all of those. You recognize the risk, and you simply evaluate that on the investment side. On the property side, you make sure that you insure it. Okay. In forced place insurance, you can go for 80% of the value, 100%, so you can measure how much you want to insure that property for. But that's how it's all done. That way you're covered, and you can, again, the overall goal, minimize the risk, reduce the risk, to something that absolutely makes sense for you. So happy for my client. I know there's always a bit of anxiety, when something like that happens, because in his case, the borrower was trying to contact the note owner. Now they're obligated, really, again, in the security instrument, to contact the lien holder in case that there's damage to the property. So they did track down the previous owner to the policy, who contacted my student and let them know that there's a problem there. So what are the next steps? Well, my student goes to his servicing company and says, hey, received information from the other one that we need to reach out and see what the damage assessment was. And, again, from a liability standpoint, hey, you guys were required to have it. You didn't have it. So sorry, but you got to fix the property on your own, and obviously still maintain making property payments. And, the other thing I thought about was, which I do have to check, I'm here in Florida, and in Florida, you can have property insurance, but certain hurricane damages won't get covered. You need a special supplemental hurricane insurance. And with some of these forced place insurance policies, or even real estate investor risk policies that cover the liability as well, I don't know. That's a good question to ask, and I certainly will be asking Beth and her team. Would certain hurricane damage be covered or not in a case like that? So these are all good questions that we have to cover and measure. But that's all I got for you today. I know that's a fairly quick one, but an important one nonetheless. And I'm off to Fort Lauderdale, and I hope you all have a safe and wonderful Thanksgiving, and look forward to putting together another for you, Watercooler Wednesday for you once again.